Good afternoon. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here. Glad to have you along. Continue our discussion of the political issues that are enveloping the city and the country. In Minneapolis, on the ballot are three critical ballot questions. One having to do with the structure of the government, the relationship between the mayor and city council, the executive power, and the legislative power, sort of delineating, differentiating those. Another has to do with the question that is top of mind across the country. I think incorrectly it's been labeled the defund the police effort, but I think more, this is my take, it has to do with how we will approach public safety, public policing, both in policy and the number and kind of resources that are brought to support individuals and public safety. The last amendment or policy initiative in the Minneapolis, and one like it in St. Paul as well, has to do with rent control. I'm pleased to have as a guest today Salah Muhammad, who is here on behalf of Color of Change. Color of Change is one of the organizations nationally that's raising the question, generating the debate about what public safety and law enforcement should look like, how it should operate. Brother Muhammad, good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane.
Appreciate you having me, Al McFarland. It's a great opportunity to talk about the work that we've been doing on the ground in Minneapolis, connecting with residents and voters around this really critical issue.
Let's get right into it. You tell me, what are you doing and what is the mission? What is the vision? What is the vision first and what is the mission?
Well, our vision is to always represent and uplift the voices of Black folks. We heard from 22,000 residents in Minneapolis who supported this petition to get this question added to the ballot. And I love how you framed it of it's being mischaracterized as a movement to defund or get rid of police. It is really a movement to expand what we consider is public safety. And what that means is a system where government is responsible for safety that doesn't include a police only option. It means an expanded view of what it looks like to have mental health care responders, folk that are trained in de-escalation, so we can take a more holistic approach to safety. And that takes us to the ballot question, which is the yes on question number 2. We're asking the Minneapolis voters to support this question to reshape and expand public safety by creating this new Department of Public Safety.
And so what's your sense of how the public is responding? As you indicated, some 22,000 plus people signed petitions. That's certainly a base. But as we move towards the election on November 2nd, and I don't know if there's a sense with exit polling of what's happened with the early ballots cast, but what is your sense of what the market is doing right now, what the voter bloc is doing in response to the questions being raised?
You know, my sense of talking to community members face to face when we're canvassing, when we're calling, when we're texting voters is that when we engage on the substance of the question, they're for it. They understand that this moment is an opportunity to really expand what public safety looks like. You know, I think of one of our members, her name is Talaya Byers. She has a son who's autistic. She was out canvassing with us in the previous weeks, and one of the things that she expressed with me is I love police. I want to have police there to protect me, but I also want to make sure that there's someone that knows how to engage and interact with my son if it calls for someone to assist him. Right now, we don't have police that can do that. And frankly, it's not their job to. It shouldn't be added into their responsibility. And that's a huge concern that I'm hearing from voters across the spectrum, that we provide and put too much on our police departments to hold things that's just not in their purview, and what would it could be and look like to have a Department of Public Safety that has that expanded approach to community safety.
So a lot of the criticism, Brother Salah, has been that there has not been clarity. The language of the question uh, uh, is described as ambiguous, uncertain, not well thought out, not presented in a way that is planful, specific, and in a way that has engaged a lot of voters. You might disagree with that. Well, let me let you respond to that. That's what I hear in talking to candidates. I've been talking to candidates for the past several months, some of whom support and many of whom do not support the position you've taken. What do you say to that question about the specificity and the clarity with which you all are proposing, which the question proposes to shift from the present to a newer, different system of public safety?
That's a great point, and these are conversations that we're having with voters in Minneapolis face to face, right? And so I think there is some confusion along those lines where what the question does, it removes the constraints and handcuffs that legislators, that members of city council have on shaping what safety looks like in the community. Right now, the city charter says that the only person who has the power to make these changes that Minneapolis voters want and need is the mayor. And the mayor has unfortunately sat on the sidelines when it comes to making these changes. So, what this question does is it expands and allows voters to have their elected representatives be a part of shaping what safety can be in their communities. There's been plans that was tried to move forward when city council tried to move on this last year that was blocked by the mayor. And so now this is an opportunity to take it to the voters to have their voices heard on what expanding safety looks like. This doesn't mean that officers or that the police exist will be as it exists today will be gone after election day. It doesn't mean that officers will be fired. That's not the case. What it means is we have an option to expand what public safety can look like. It does not mean we get rid of the current system overnight.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm speaking with Salah Muhammad. He's here on behalf of Color of Change, one of the organizations asking for voters to support question 2 on the Minneapolis election ballot next week. Question 2 moves the city towards eliminating the police department as we know it and creating an alternative approach to public safety. Have I described that properly, Salah? I want to make sure that what I present is exactly what you intend for people to hear from the framers of the initiative.
I appreciate that. The one thing that I will add to it is that this has been a movement long coming. This is not something that was created overnight. As I mentioned earlier, over 22,000 residents across Minneapolis signed on this petition to get this on the ballot. The majority of the folks that we speak to recognize that the status quo does not work when it comes to safety in our communities. And so there are more residents that understand that we need to move toward expanding what safety can be, and that police should not be the only ones responding to the needs of the community.
So what other cities have moved in this direction? What's the model? What are the framers of this question looking to for guideline or to inform how the city of Minneapolis should move?
That's a good question. There's elements of this in many different cities. In Philadelphia, they have a hotline you can call 311 for assistance outside of purview for police. I think the difference is what we're seeing in those instances is that they live separately. They're not under one roof. And this opportunity in Minneapolis is to house them under one roof so that safety and holistic approach to what health and wellness looks like for our communities operates together. That means it's informed on data. That means that 911 response times are equal in all neighborhoods. That means that folks that are trained in de-escalation is not just a separate nonprofit or organization or church group that does amazing work, that it all fits under the umbrella of public safety. And it's not just the police and these organizations not working in tandem.
Let me do this. I like doing this. And if you don't mind, hear your personal story, how you come to this work. And I'll come back to the work. I think it makes the work real to know what your investment is in moving this discussion and this agenda forward. Talk about you, Brother Muhammad.
I appreciate that. I come from a single mother of 9 children. born and raised in a community where every year we went to a new school, where we faced tough challenges. Where
Where were you raised?
I grew up in, born and raised in Philadelphia,
Okay.
and I saw the work that my mother put in for the family, but I also saw a lack of sense of community. In many moments, growing up poor like that, it felt very isolating, and so I come to this work to be a shoulder for someone else, to let them know that there's community that stretches across these city borders that have been created, these state lines that have been created, and a lot of ways, the demographics of race and ideology and financial status, because community is truly the solution to all of the woes of our societal problems. And that's where I come from. I came to Color of Change through an event called a Black Joy Social, which is just, to me, it was, wow, how dare you center our joy into this work that we do? And it was amazing. And so from that perspective, I continue to do this work with Color of Change through joy and looking at it as an opportunity to uplift our values, uplift the importance of being in community with each other through joy, and not just through what pains us on a daily basis.
Were you on the ground here in the market in Minnesota during the George Floyd incident?
I wasn't on the ground in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, when the incident happened. I was in Philadelphia, where we took place in protests and marches, similar to what took place in Minneapolis, LA, Atlanta. But in Philadelphia, where I currently am right now,
Mhm.
I saw a sea of folks that looked like me and some didn't. And, honestly, it was beautiful. It's unfortunate that we've come to these moments and moments of crisis, but it's important to not let that be defined us, not let that be the moment that we constantly live in. And it's moments like this that we're in, where Minneapolis has the opportunity to really expand and reshape how safety is viewed and looks at in our communities, that it really is what propels me forward day after day into this work.
Describe the Color of Change organization. What's your role in it, and how does the organization work? Who is Color of Change?
And so today I'm with Color of Change PAC. We are a political action committee. We are a Black-led racial justice organization. Our goal is really simple. We want to make the world a more humane and less hostile world for Black people. And I love being able to say that, because the majority of the folks that I work with on a day-to-day basis are folks that look like me, or folks that are allies in this work as well. And I'm a regional field manager, so I have the opportunity to travel to different communities across the country and hear from what the community wants and uplift and organize around the needs of that community. And that's really important to me, because um, you know we all have a voice in what our needs are and what our community should be shaped in, and um, being able to organize a community to uplift that message is just, it's a powerful tool. It's a powerful ally in our arsenal. But through that, who we are, as I mentioned earlier, where all of that is threaded through this theme of Black joy in everything that we do. It's always fun jumping on Zoom and seeing our members' faces, and just talking about what we did through the week or the weekend, just talking about our favorite moments that bring us joy as we start to propel us through different actions in this work.
So, well, let me ask you the question that you've set up. What is your favorite moment that brings you joy?
Oh, that's a good one. I for me, it's my wife and kids.
Mhm.
I'm a married man now. I have three children of my own. One is in college right now. One is 11th grade in high school. Um, and one is done with high school. And that brings me joy, being able to provide them with a life that I didn't have growing up, provide them with a sense of community and a sense of that they can truly accomplish and be anything they want when they do have that community and support. That brings me joy, being able to fill the cup of my family and of others.
How did you come to organizing work? How did you come to Color of Change?
By happenstance. I was truly, after the 2016 election, I was left wondering, how could our country come to this moment of electing a leader?
So we'll come back to that. What were you doing before that, uh, in terms of community engagement work? Uh, what was your life about?
My life was about. So I actually worked in management, hiring folks and giving them opportunities that they would have previously been looked over for. From there, I started my own podcast and started writing and sharing my stories through narrative.
Mhm.
And that is how I got my first initial introduction into Color of Change, because it was where I was sitting down and writing my story is where I met a young woman in a coffee shop who invited me to a Black Joy social. And it was the perfect opportunity, because it was this moment where I was sharing my story through this platform of my podcast and being the on the other side of the interview table and interviewing leaders in my community, city council members, elected state representatives. Is where I got an opportunity to dive really deeply with Color of Change on the importance and power of my personal narrative.
Mhm. Okay, okay. So your training, what's your training? What's your background?
My
And
background,
listen, what I do is conversation. So if I'm being
yeah,
too
absolutely.
intrusive, you just say, I don't want to answer that. But in the meantime, I'm gonna act like we knew each other for a long, long, long time. And we're just having a good conversation. That's the spirit of this, okay?
I absolutely love it. And if
Okay.
I doubt there's an area where I wouldn't feel
Okay.
comfortable with going. The more we talk, you'll discover I'm a pretty chatty person, to be quite honest.
Cool. Cool.
But you know, like I said, I was born and raised in Philadelphia here. I graduated from Germantown High School in Philadelphia. I tried my hand in college. I went to numerous different colleges, but it wasn't the right experience for me. It was also at a time where I was a single father myself, and was, struggling and working to make ends meet for my son, and was, trying to be the best and role model that I could be for him. So that meant working during the day while he was in daycare and in school, and then going to school at night, while I was also helping him with his homework, and then he was going to sleep at night. That was a tough road for me. Ultimately, I left the different schools, the multiple different schools that I attended, and continued to build my career. I got into hospitality management, uniquely enough, where I was able to travel to different cities, help operate and work in different hotels, train new staff, as I mentioned earlier, give and meet folks that were just like me, who had potential, who had the skill set, who had the ability to communicate, but weren't given the necessary challenge or opportunity because they lacked the credentials on their resume. I was able to give those folks an opportunity where they are leaders in their industry today. Um, and so my education comes from a wealth of different areas. To this day, I'm still being educated, even in opportunities that we're talking about here. This is an education opportunity for me.
What's your lineage? What's your background? I ask friends and guests to talk about whose shoulders they stand on, and typically I mean who's your mama, who's your daddy, and how far back do those ancestors connect with you today? What does lineage have to do with the moment that you're in, and what does lineage have to do with the future that's created from the moment that you're in right now?
Sure, sure. So lineage, it's interesting how lineage has a way of coming full circle, even if you don't know it. And so my grandmother was born and raised in St. Louis. My father born and raised here in Philadelphia. My father is of native descent. My grandmother on my father's side actually started different movements here in Philadelphia, activist movements here in Philadelphia. Her name is oh my God, why am I blanking on my grandmother's name in the moment? But it'll come to me. But
Sure, sure.
she, looking, during the pandemic last year, I did a lot around looking at my own lineage and do like the
Mhm,
ancestry, I think, and
mhm,
come to find out that she was doing activist work in the 70s, just like I'm doing here today.
mhm,
And so that full circle moment, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it when she passed in 2008. So discovering it this, decades later, it's, you almost wonder if it's in your blood.
How and when did you take the name Salah Muhammad?
That's my mother gave that to me. So my mother, like I said, mentioned, she was born and raised in St. Louis. She moved to Philadelphia, and converted to Islam,
Mhm.
and gave me my birth name of Salah Muhammad.
Okay. Okay, great. Wonderful story. Wonderful name. Thanks for sharing that. And I wonder, I ask people often, brother, the question I just asked you is, uh, uh, meaning, how does history stand in you, and how do you stand in history? Uh, and the question comes from the sense that we all, uh, if we're lucky, are mission driven. And so, in that spirit, I ask you uh, about your personal mission. Why are you here? I know you must contemplate the question, and have come to actions and decisions based on uh, uh, I'd say a living and ever evolving awareness. Let me throw it out to you. What is the mission in your life and for your life? And you can use that to come back into, weave in and out of the discussion of the moment on the ballot question and the work of the Color of Change pact.
It's a good question. It's a very poignant question to me right now because I'm currently taking a course on narrative and storytelling at Harvard. And I'm faced with that question often through this narrative and storytelling of sharing my own narrative. And I think, as I think about this moment that we're in, the moment that I'm in doing this work, um, it's community. Community is my passion. It's my thread that connects everything, and it's trying to encourage others to recognize the strength of community through all of our struggles, through all of our pains, through all of the joy, of the work that we do, whether it is about activist work or political activation, or whether it's about being the best bookseller that you can be. Community is that thread that connects all of those different things. That has been a theme in my life, or for my successes or lack thereof, has been that sense of community. I can be as great as I can be, but what am I, if I'm not for something, right? And for me, that is community.
Sisters and brothers?
Yes, I have a large family. My mother had 9 kids, so I
That's right. You
had
said that. You
five
said that.
brothers and 3 sisters. Very large
And
family.
where are you in the mix?
I am number 7.
Okay.
So not the oldest, not the youngest. But interestingly, in the middle where I had a lot of responsibility for others. So that meant cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, laundry, taking my 2 younger siblings to school. It was a unique experience.
Well, I say in my family, the man in the middle makes the money. And so it's one in the middle that is able to look at both ends of the spectrum and work the entire thing to the advantage of the all, as a matter of fact. So that's pretty cool. So joy, I want to explore that with you as well. And so you say the mission in part is to examine and encourage to discover pathways to joy. Talk about joy, what joy means to you. When you say that, what do you mean? What are you really talking about?
I'm talking about smiling. I'm talking about laughing. I'm talking about being filled, in a way that it doesn't have to be any particular reason or why. As a black man, sometimes joy is frowned upon, honestly. Growing up, as a child of the 80s and 90s, joy was also always often expressed onto us that I needed to be hard, and I needed to be the protector and a soldier, and all of these war analogies. And where's the joy in that? Where's something that is carrying, I can't carry on every day if I'm just a soldier. I need something to that makes me happy. And so joy is something that is just meaningless, that can be meaningless, that but can be so meaningful to propel you from hour to hour, minute to minute, day to day.
And so, how does that again connect with the language and the intent of the ballot initiative?
Well,
In you, this is your words, your experience, and kind of your
yeah,
motivation. Yeah.
absolutely. So it connects in a way where it's not centering only pain in this work. It's not centering that we have to be fearful of what is, that we can be joyous and look towards the possibilities of what can be. Joy, doesn't just mean that I'm laughing and smiling. Joy, presents itself as opportunity. It presents itself as hopeful. And so through this hopeful work, joy, and joy, it allows us to look at an opportunity of how we can be hopeful of expanding safety can look like. When I think of safety, I think of folks that are happy, that are smile, that are joyful, that feel protected and taken care of. And right now, folks don't feel that. Not just in Minneapolis, but in communities across the country when we look at how policing is in our society. And so, this opportunity to be joyful in this moment is an opportunity to look at how we can expand the protections of what public safety can be, and we can feel a little bit more safe.
What's the organizational structure of Color of Change, both the PACT and the organization? And I raise the question just so I'm transparent, to uh, reflect some sense or question as to whether the organization is white led or white financed, and even if it is, I mean, is it number one? And on the other hand, even if it is, so what? What about it? Does that question come up? And
Yeah, so we're financed by our members. We do receive donations. I can't speak, to exactly, I don't work on the finance side, so I can't tell you, who and where all of the all of money is coming from. But I can tell you that our members are huge contributors. We are led as well by our members. Like as I mentioned before, the majority of folks that work at this organization are Black, meaning I'm Black. My boss is Black. Our president Rashad Robinson is Black. Our members, leaders in different areas, whether it be on our finance team, whether it be our HR, whether it be our campaign directors for different initiatives that we take on, are Black, and that's a beautiful thing to me.
okay, some people feel that the leaders of the uh, ballot two question in Minneapolis have a second agenda of removing the current chief of police, a Black man, Medaria Arredondo. I don't know if you've met him before or if you know his story, but one of the arguments, the pushback arguments that is being presented is that we've got a leader in the department that has made and is prepared to continue the kinds of reforms that make police officers more accountable, respectful, and and also an organization that is willing to expand uh, and contract at the same time the specific duties of the um, policing element of public safety and invite in and grow the presence of social work and psychiatry and health and mental health and community connectedness, that there's a movement in that direction under the leadership of Medaria Arredondo, and that there is a reception to that idea in the office of the mayor, Jacob Fry. On the other hand, there are those, and I think some of the leaders in city council, who seem to be saying that the city has been sort of intransigent, that the leadership at the mayor's office, because of the vetoes you mentioned earlier, and maybe because of the history of policing in Minneapolis, that expecting substantive change is uh, a form of insanity, and that we're at a point now where uh, genuine overhaul or reinvention is the order of the day. So those are the two sides as I see it. How do you, are you seeing it the way I'm seeing it? How would you describe the situation differently from the way I have?
I would describe it differently by saying it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Hmm. Okay.
You know, our members have indicated that their primary concern isn't about the removal of Chief Arredondo. Their primary concern is the current function of police, that they do too much, quite frankly, that's not within their purview, that there should be an expanded view on what safety means, that includes mental health care response, that they need to feel protected and safe when they call for assistance, that the right person will show up to assist. And that's kind of where it comes back to for me and for our members that we're speaking to. You know, this isn't an opportunity to remove any particular one person from office that they hold, whether that's Arredondo, whether that is Mayor Fry. This is an opportunity to hear from our members what safety means to them, what safety could be if we remove the handcuffs that are in place currently, that the city charter mandates that there's a minimum number of officers, that only the mayor can structurally make the changes that the residents of Minneapolis want to see, but has refused to make those changes. All right. And so, you know, our goal is to remove those handcuffs. Let's make those changes. Let's expand what public safety is. This does not mean that Chief Arredondo has to leave. This does not mean that any one police officer is fired on November 3rd after Election Day or 30 days thereafter, right? This means that let's start adding those elements that you just mentioned about how we expand, and allow Chief Arredondo to add those elements of the police response, folks that are trained and officers that are trained on de-escalation. Let's put that into policy. That's not just mandated by the mayor. That is representative of all of the elected leaders from the residents of Minneapolis.
So the skeptic would say, let's remember the capacity of the system and even our friends to engage in tricknology, right? That while on the one hand we espouse a beautiful vision of a new strategy, a new power sharing dynamic, who's going to show up? Who's a social worker, a psychologist, a health worker, an EMT, a counselor, a therapist to support and do the things that we've perhaps improperly asked untrained officers to do. Well, the skeptic will say, look at history, it'll be some more white people, not the ones that show up now, but different white people. And the Al McFarlaneism here is that too often we get the misery, they get the money. And in fact, our misery is a business for them. And so it cautions that we look at solutions that are not organic, that do not come from within, or that ask us to walk away from gains that we have made. There is a sense that through struggle and conflict and contact and negotiation, that progress, however slow and incremental, is being made. And the question is, do you walk away from that in favor of a new dispensation, but the new dispensation has no memory and ends up replacing one set of white people with newer, young white people who still feel they have both a right and an obligation, a privilege of power, and who either spoken or not operate in ways to maintain us at the margin. That's a mouthful. What do you think, Salah Muhammad?
You know what I would say to that is, the goal of this isn't to replace all white people with black people, right? This movement, this work
No, the
is
question is, will the movement keep white people in place and keep excluding black people? That's the question I'm raising. Not to
it's
replace white people with black people, but to facilitate the ability of black people to be seen as and to operate as the solution part of the equation, not just the problem part. And to not be the business of white people, but to be in the business of our own health, our own healing, our education, our economy. How do we mind our business, understanding that the entire spectrum of human activity, endeavor, governance, education, culture, economics, that we've got a role to play, and it's a role that we have been sidelined from in institutional, structural ways, but that we can no longer stand back and let happen to us. That's my thought.
Yeah, and to that point that I was getting to, it takes a multi-ethnic uh, 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 degree of folks to be able to provide solutions to all of this. And so, Black people are not a monolith in their viewpoints and their ideals. There are Black folks that are supporters of this, and there are some that are cautious, just like you mentioned, right? And so that doesn't mean that this will be a coalition that is only one race led. What this means is this is an opportunity to have safety expanded that's driven by data, that's driven by the needs of the community, that the needs of the community's voices are heard throughout this process. Because right now, the needs of the community are not being heard. The needs and what safety means from the community is not being addressed. And so this is an opportunity not to give all power or to isolate voices. This is an opportunity to add voices to the spectrum of what safety looks like. Because right now, there is no view of what safety it looks like from the community's perspective and how policing is moved forward in our neighborhoods, right? And so reshaping this, taking the power away from one person to make these changes, and sharing it with the majority of elected officials in the city, allows members and residents to have a say on what safety looks like in their communities. So I view this as an opportunity not to remove Black voices from the conversation. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's an opportunity to allow their voices to be heard and then shape what a police or hopefully this Department of Public Safety can look like when it interacts within our communities.
So talk again, and you touched on it before, but come back to it again. How this debate, discussion, and how decisions like this have unfolded successfully from the point of view of color of change in other communities. Give me some examples and some stories.
I think I'm losing a little bit of reception here, but I think you asked for examples of this taking place in other communities.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I use the example of I mentioned here in Philadelphia, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's opportunities where we can call responders using 311. That is not a police, right? Where we can have intervention in moments where we can respond to the needs of the community. That's not that. However, it sits separately from the police department. And what we're asking in this situation is that it all sits under one umbrella. We know that folks want and need the assistance of unique responders. That's not just someone showing up with a badge and a gun for every situation. However, in different areas, in different cities, it sits separately. What does it look like to sit together? What does it look like to have how police respond be driven by data and not just sitting a cop on a corner in a neighborhood where we think bad things happen? That data has been driven by the needs of the community, and in their community, the voice of that community is a part of that process.
Other cities that you have stories about? I mean, does Seattle or Portland, do those cities, have they moved in this direction with success?
I can't speak for Seattle or Portland directly. I can speak to like I mentioned here in Philadelphia, cities that have different elements of what we're talking about here. Minneapolis, New Jersey, for instance, in Camden has done some serious restructuring within their police department on how they view safety. But again, in a lot of these areas, and many of them, they sit separately from the police department. And what we're asking here is that it sits under one umbrella.
Okay. So I'm about at the end of the interview here from my point of view, but I'm so glad to have the chance to meet you and talk to you. Tell me about your podcast. How do people follow you or follow your work? I'm just delighted to have this conversation with you.
Sure, sure. So I'm Salah's Corner on all platforms, whether that be Facebook, social media, and Twitter. That's how you can find my podcast. You can visit salahscorner.com to hear my interviews that I have with elected leaders around important issues just like this. And hear from the community's voices on things that they're doing to strengthen those ties of community into this work to address the needs of all of us.
Great, great. Well, listen, brother, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. You're welcome to come back anytime. I'm impressed and pleased to make this connection. Keep up the good work.
I appreciate that. And if I could also just plug one time,
Yeah.
to hear more about our work with Color of Change and to read more about the ballot question, you can visit votingwhileblack.com /MPLS to hear about how folks can get involved to help engage with voters in Minneapolis to have some of these really, really crucial and important conversations.
And so we've got a few more minutes. I mean, if you got anything else you want to say, now's the time. And I'm listening, and I hope that we'll have some listeners be curious about it as well.
There's opportunity to, like I mentioned, there's opportunity to get involved and volunteer with us by visiting votingwhileblack.com /MPLS. We're also going to be canvassing this weekend. So you can visit the website to figure out how you can join us for some in-person canvassing opportunities. We'll be passing out PPE, that's masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer, so folks can remain safe during this pandemic. And then folks can also attend virtually our different events, whether that is on Zoom, helping us call voters, or texting voters in Minneapolis. So there's multiple opportunities to be a part of this movement, and also movements that's happening in different cities across the country, because we have opportunities for members to pull up in different squads, is what we like to call them, in cities outside of Minneapolis as well.
Put your text, or either send me a text when we're done, just so I can stay in touch with you personally. Let me give you my email information. It's McFarlanemedia@gmail.com. So if you can shoot me an email, that'd be awesome.
It was McFarlanemedia@gmail.com.
Yep, McFarlane media@gmail.com. Brother, I want to thank you again. I'm happy to have this conversation with you, and good luck. I'm bringing other people who have different points of view and their points of view forward as well. The key for me is what I call supporting, creating, facilitating robust conversation. Let's talk about, let's argue, and let's reason together. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you for having me. Thank you, Al.
All right. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We'll see you tomorrow again at 1:00. Thank you so much. Take care.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation. It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall.
Free or guilty,
It's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We had enough
of all the money you were making.
We had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty, it's So many gone.